Hello, and welcome to the lesson on mental calculation. What are we going to learn in this lesson? First, we'll understand how do we square any two-digit number. Then we'll find out how to find the square roots of any number. And finally, we'll learn how to find the cube roots of any number. And we'll learn all these techniques without any long drawn calculations. Okay, most of the answers will be obtained in a matter of seconds. However, to do that magic, you need to have some prerequisites. You need to know squares up to 20 at the top of your mind. How many of you know all these values? Well, I know most of us know squares up till maybe 12 or 13, but try and make some effort and remember the remaining 6 or 7 values. I'll tell you, this really helps. Second, you need to know your cubes up to 15. Now I know this is a little tricky area because most of us know cubes up to 7 or 8 maybe, but try and put in some effort and remember the rest of the values as well. You need to know all of these values at the top of your mind. And finally, something easy. You need to know how to double any two-digit numbers. Should that be easy? Yes, okay. In case it's not, you can use this technique of partitioning as we know. So 28 times 2, you can always split 28 as 20 and 8. You double 20, you get 40. You double 8, you get 16. And 40 add 16 is 56. That's the double of 28. Let's take one more example. What is 69 times 2? So we split 69 as 60 plus 9. Double of 60 is 120 and double of 9 is 18. Together, it makes 138. So you should know how to double any two-digit number. Perfect. Having known all these three things, okay, squares up to 20, cubes up to 15, and doubling any two-digit number, we are good to start then, right? Let's first find out how do we square any two-digit number. Here's an example, 17 squared. Okay, all it takes is you need to have a grid like this. The first step is to square the units digit, which is 7. 7 squared is 49. That goes into the last last two of the 4 digits. Then you square the first digit, which is 1. 1 squared is 1. But because 1 is a single digit number, you need to have a placeholder 0 before 1. So it is 0, 1. So the tens place digit, square it, write it in the first few slots. Units place digit, square it, write it in the last 2 slots. Okay, what next? Well, now this is the critical step. You multiply both the digits, which is 1 and 7 in this case, and double it. So 1 times 7 is 7. Double of that is 14. And this 14, you will write it right in the middle. Okay, so one of the units place of 14 is written below the tens digit of your first answer, which is 49. And the tens digit of your 14 is written below the units digit of your second answer, which is 1. Okay, if you don't want to get confused, just write it right in the middle after having left one space from the right. Okay, and now you simply have to add these values. So 9 add 0 is 9, 4 add 4 is 8, 1 plus 1 is 2. So the answer is 289. Let's look at one more example, 34 squared. Let's follow the same rules again. First, square the units digit. 4 squared is 16. Then square the tens digit. 3 squared is 9, but I need a placeholder, so I'll add a 0. So 0, 9. What was the next step? That's the most important step. You multiply the two digits, which is 3 and 4 in this case, and double it. 3 times 4 is 12, and double of that is 24. That you will write it right in the middle after having left one space from the right. Now you add 6 plus 0 is 6, 1 plus 4 is 5, 9 plus 2 is 11. That carries over to 0 and you get 1156. That's your answer to 34 squared. Right? This is easier than your normal method. Okay, let's do one more. How about 84 squared? This is a little tricky, but we still manage it. First step, 4 square is 16. That fills the last two digits. 8 squared is 64. That fills the first two digits. And the next step, you multiply 8 and 4 and double it. 8 times 4 is 32 and double of that is 64. And you write that 64 right in the middle. And then you add all the digits. Okay, 6 add 0 is 6, 1 add 4 is 5, 4 add 6 is 10, 1 carries over to the left, that is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. So the answer is 7056. Are you sure you understood this? If not, then maybe you can rewind it and play it again. Why not try out these examples? Maybe you can pause the video at this moment and try out finding the squares of these numbers. Well, just in case you have tried out the answers, here are your answers. Okay, you can mark your work now. I'm sure you would have got all of them correct. Well, now let's take a special case of squaring numbers. Squaring numbers which end with 5. How do we square numbers? Okay, most of you should be familiar with this, but nevertheless, okay, let me just explain you how it is done. Let's say we have to do 35 squared. The first step is to do 5 squared, which is 25. And now this is important. The second step is you find the tens digit, which is 3 in this case, and multiply it by the next number on the number line. What is the next number on the number line to 3? 4, right? So you multiply 3 by 4. 3 times 4 is 12, and bingo, there you go. That's your answer. It's as simple as that. You do 5 squared, which is 25. That's the last two digits. And the initial digits is obtained by multiplying the tens digit by the next digit on the number line. So next to 3 is 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. So the final answer is 1225. Let's take one more example. 65 squared. Okay, let's follow the same process again. First step, 5 squared is 25. Now, how do you get the second step? You multiply the tens digit, which is 6, to the next number on the number line, which is 7. So 6 times 7 is 42. And there you go. The answer is 4225. Here are some more questions for you to try. Pause the video at this moment and get the answers to these questions. Well, if you have found the answers to these questions, you can mark your work now. Here are the answers. Okay, now, in order to find the square root of numbers, you need to know the skill of identifying the square root using the last digit. Didn't understand? Okay, for that, let us understand what are the squares of numbers ending in. So if the number ends in 1, the square would end in 1. If the number ends in 2, the square would end in 4. If the number ends in 3, square would end in 9. Number ends in 4, its square would end in 6. If the number ends in 5, the square would end in 5. If the number ends in 6, the square would end in 6. The number ends in 7, if you square it, it ends in 9. If the number ends in 8, the square of that number would end in 4. If the number ends in 9, if you square it, it ends in 1. And finally, if the number ends in 0, okay, its square will also end in 0. These are easy to verify, right? You can take any simple numbers and check. The last digit of the squares are important. Why? Because if I put the other way around, the table other way around, if the last digit of the square is 0, then your original number should also have ended in 0, as you can see. Likewise, if the last digit of the square was 5, then the original number would also end in 5. That's it, okay? From here, things get a little complicated. What if the last digit ends in 1? Yeah, okay, you can see that 1 on top, but there's also 9 bottom, right? So this number should have ended in either a 1 or a 9. right? So any number which ends in 1 or a 9, if you squared it, the square would end in 1. What if the square ends in 4? Well, as you can see, if the square ends in 4, the original number would end in either a 2 or a 8. Likewise, if the square ends in 9, the original number would end in either a 3 or a 7. And finally, if the square ends in a 6, the original number would end in 4 or 6. Make sure you remember these values. Okay, you need to know the square root, the last digit of your square root by looking at the last digit of the squares. Right. With that skill in place, now we are ready to find the square root of any number. So let's try and find square root of 4624 without any mathematical method. Okay, it's very simple method. Okay, the first step is to split this number into two parts. The first part contains the last two digits and the second part contains the remaining digits. Something like this. So the first part is the last two digits, which is 24. And the second part is the remaining digits, which is 46 in this case. Now, find out 46 lies between which two squares. 46 lies between 6 squared and 7 squared. Remember, 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49. So 46 lies between 6 and 7. Now you should always take the lower one. Okay, so in this case, it's 6. So your answer will have a tens place digit, which is 6. So your answer is in 60s, right? That's half the battle won. Now, if you look at the last digit of your square, it is 4. That means your last digit of the number that you had squared should be 2 or 8. Remember, 2 squared is 4, 8 squared is 64. So the last digit of your original number should be 2 or 8, which means your original number should have been 62 or 68, right? So within no time, we have now zeroed it on two numbers, which could be your answer. It could be 62 squared or 68 squared. Now, how do you decide whether it's 62 or 68? Now let's look at 46, the first part once again, okay? Is it close to 6 squared or 7 squared? 6 squared is 36, 7 squared is 49. So 46 is close to 7 squared, indicating that your answer would be towards the higher end of the spectrum, right? Which means your answer cannot be 62, it is 68. Right? If you have not understood this step, okay, you may go back, rewind, and understand it again. But we'll look at another example, and there's another opportunity for you to understand this again. So 1156. Step number 1 is to divide this into two parts, last two digits and the remaining digits. Right? So 56 becomes your part 1 and 11 becomes your part 2. Now, step number 1, 11 lies between which two squares? It's 3 squared 9 and 4 squared 16. So 11 lies between 3 and 4. You always take the smaller of the two, which is 3, indicating that your answer is in 30s. Right? Last digit of the square is 6, indicating that the square root would end in 4 or 6. So your square root, the final answer would be 34 or 36. So far, okay, it's an easy ride. From here, things get tricky. 11 is close to 3 squared and not 4 squared, right? 3 squared is 9, 11 is close to 9 and not 16, which means your answer would be on the lower end of the spectrum, which means answer would be 34 and not 36. Okay, you will get the hang of it if you do more practice. Let's do this one, 26569, okay? Let's find the square root of this number. You split this into two parts, last two digits and the initial digits. So 69 becomes the first part, 265 becomes the second part. 265 lies between 16 squared, which is 256, and 17 squared, which is 289. Right? You always take the lower one. So 16 will be your first two digits of the answer, which means your answer is in 160s, 160 something. Correct? The last digit is 9. That indicates that the last digit of your answer would be 3 or 7, which means now you have zeroed it on two answers. It can be either 163 or 167. Now comes the tricky part. 265 is close to 256, which is 16 squared and not 17 squared, right? 16 is the lower of the two ranges, right? And hence your answer is 163, not 167. Well, let's do one more. 83521. Okay. Split this into two parts, 21 and 835. 835 lies between 28 squared and 29 squared. And you always take the lower one. So 280, that is 28, which means your answer is in 280s. Last digit of your answer is 1, indicating your square root would end in 1 or 9, which means your final answer has to be 281 or 289. Now, even reaching this is a victory, right? After such a big number, you found the square root in no time. The only tricky part now is it 281 or 289? For that, you need to find out 835 is close to 28 or 29. It's close to 29 squared, correct? Which means you'll take the higher of the two numbers, which is 289. That's your final answer. Now, how do you find square root of decimals? Okay, now this is again very easy. It looks difficult, but not so. First, you find the square root of the number without the decimal. So the number without the decimal is 15129. Let's go about finding the square root of that number. Okay, 151 lies between 12 squared and 13 squared. So it will be 12. Remember, the lower one. The number ends in 9. So your square root would end in a 3 or a 7, which means your answer is 123 or 127. And finally, 151 is close to 12 squared and not 13 squared. And hence, it will be lower of the two answers. Your final answer is 123. But this is the square root of 15129, as in 15129. But remember, our original number has two decimals. So your answer would have half as many decimals. So if this one has two decimal, your answer would have only one decimal. And that's your answer, 12.3. So the only thumb rule that you need to remember is your square root will have half as many decimals as the square. Let's do one more. Square root of 5.6169. First, let us write the number without the decimal. So it is 56,169. Let's first try and find out the square root of this number. For that, we need to split the number into two, 69 and 561. 561 lies between 23 squared and 24 squared. Write the lower of the two, which is 23. The number ends in a 9, indicating the square root will end in a 3 or a 7, which means your answer has to be either a 233 or a 237. And then find out 561 is close to 23 or 24 squared. It is close to 24 squared, indicating that your answer will be the higher of the two numbers, which is 237. Now for the decimal. The original number has decimal after 4 places, right? It has 4 decimals. So the square root will have 2 decimal, half as many, remember that. So it will be 2.37. The number of decimal will be half as many as the original number. Remember that. Right. How about 0.007396? Okay. Write the number without the decimal, that is 7396. Split it into two parts, 96 and 73. 73 lies between 8 squared and 9 squared. You take the lower of the two, which is 8. Number ends in 6, indicating the square root will end in 4 or 6. So your answer has to be 84 or 86. And finally, 73 is close to 9 squared, 81, and not 8 squared, 64. And hence, you'll take the higher of the two answers. So 86 is your final answer. Now for the decimals. The original number has 6 decimals, right? You can see that. It has 6 decimals. So this number, the square root will have 3 decimals, 1, 2, and 3. So we'll have a placeholder of 0. So your final answer is 0.086. Okay, now let's try and understand how do we find cube roots of numbers. Now this is much, much easier than square roots. The reason being, we'll have a unique cube number, a unique last digit for each cube number, which means if you look at the numbers, if they end in 1 to 0, the cubes will end in a different combination. Okay, there's no digit which is repeating in any cube number, as you can see, unlike in a square number, right? So that makes our task easy. I'll tell you how. So let's say we have to find the cube root of 658,503. In this case, you split it into two parts. First part will have the last three digits. In a square root, we had split it into last two digits and the rest. In this case, we'll split it into last three digits and the rest, right? Now, 658 lies between 8 cubed and 9 cubed. So you'll take the lower of the answers, 8. And if the last digit is 3, you have no two choices, okay? The square root will end in 7. So your answer is 87. That's why I said finding cube root is much, much easier than finding square root because there's only one possibility. In case of square root, there were two possibilities, and hence you had to do that third step, which was a little tricky. Let's try one more example, okay? How about cube root of 39,304? First, you split the number into two parts, the last three digits and the rest of the digits. 39 lies between 3 cubed and 4 cubed. So you take the lower of the two, which is 3. And because the last digit is 4, the cube root will also have the last digit 4. So your answer is 34. Right? Okay, how about this? 2097152. Let's split that into two parts, last three digits and the rest of the digits. 2097 lies between 12 cubed and 13 cubed. You will always take the lower of the two, remember? So I'll take 12. Because the last digit is 2 for the final answer, the cube root will end in 8. And hence your final answer is 128. As I said earlier, the prerequisite is that you should know your square numbers up to 20 and cube numbers up to 50 at the top of your mind. Only then you'll be able to do this magic. Right, how about cube root of this number? Okay, 3307949. Once again, let's split this number into two parts. 949, last three digits and the rest of the digits. Okay, the rest of the digits, 3307, lies between 14 cubed and 15 cubed. We'll take the lower of the two, which is 14. Because the last digit of the main number is 9, the the cube root will also end with 9, which means your answer is 149. Finally, let's end it with finding cube roots of decimals. So what will be the cube root of 103.823? The first step is the same as before, which means you write the original number without the decimal. Split this into two parts, last three digits and the rest of the digits. 103 lies between 4 cubed and 5 cubed. You take lower of the two, so the first digit of your answer will be 4. And because your final, this cube ends in a 3, the last digit of the cube root will be 7, so your answer is 47. Now for the decimal. In this case, you will find that the cube root will have 1/3 as many decimal as the original number. What that means is, if the original number has 3 decimals, cube root will have 1/3, which is 1 decimal. That's it. So your final answer in this case is 4.7. How about this? Cube root of 2.406104. Step number 1, you write the same number without the decimal. That is 2.406104. Split this into two parts, last three digits and the rest of the digits. 2406 lies between 13 cubed and 14 cubed. So you'll take 13. And because the last digit of your answer is 4, your cube root will be 4 as well. The cube root of the last digit of the cube root will also be 4. So your final answer is 134. Now the tricky part, how do you put the decimals? The original number has 6 decimal, as you can see. So the cube root will have 2 decimals. 1/3 of 6 is 2, so it will have 2 decimals. So the final answer is 1.34. And finally, what about this? Cube root of 0.778688. Write the number without the decimal, 778688. Split this into two parts, last three digits and the rest of the digits. 778 lies between 9 cubed and 10 cubed. So I'll take the lower of the two, which is 9. The final answer ends in an 8. So your cube root should end in a 2. So your answer is 92. Let's put the right decimals now. Original number has 6 decimals and 1/3 of 6 is 2. So the cube root will have 2 decimals. So the final answer is 0.92. Well, that's the end of this session. So in this session, we learned how do we square any two-digit number. Then we went on to understand how do we find square root of any two-digit number, in fact, square root of any number. And finally, we also learned how do you find cube root of any number. But remember, the prerequisites for finding all of these is your basic calculations. Squares up to 20 and cubes up to 15. Thank you.